I would like to introduce you to your favorite pair of shoes. These are actually my favorite pair. I've got many pairs of Vessies, but these weekend ones, the first shoes Vessie ever sent me were a pair of these. These are not that first pair, because I wore that first pair for basically 3 years non-stop. And they're just so super comfortable. They you put them on at first and they're always a little bit tight, but then it does this like molding thing, so it fits your feet perfectly, which is fantastic. And then you just have the most comfortable pair of shoes that you will ever wear for the next, many years. And then when those ones were you wear them for 3 years. Like, no matter how good the shoe is, at some point it's going to wear down. And I was like, yo, Vessie, I need another pair of the weekends. I wore them for 1,000 days straight. So they sent me another pair, and now I'm working my way through the next 1,000 days with these bad boys. As you can see, they're made with something called Dymatex, which means they're 100% waterproof. So whatever the weather, I'm getting dirt all over my desk because I wear these all the time. Normally I have a nice clean pair, but Vessie were like, dude, you got to promote the weekends. And I'm like, I don't keep a nice clean pair of those. I just wear them constantly. And they're like, that works. Shoes in adverts always look so clean and nice, and that's the aesthetic I was going for. And Vessie, you're like, no, it shows you wear them. Yeah, I guess. Anyway, Vessie are fantastic. Best shoes you can buy. Vessie.com/shadows. Get yourself a pair of the weekends. Get yourself a pair of whatever you want. But I'd recommend these. If you're looking for a starting point at Vessie, that's the badger. You must get these ones. Vessie.com/shadows. 15% off your first pair at checkout. Vessie.com/shadows. Thank you to them for sponsoring. Have you ever had a computer virus? Actually, had one on your computer? Well, usually they're annoying and persistent enough that you need a specialist to get rid of them completely, or you just end up wiping the whole thing and starting from zero. But look, really, removing a virus, not that difficult. Many computer viruses are simply passion projects created by a bored hobbyist in their bedroom. So, what happens when a country tries to make one? When enthusiasts from all of those bedrooms start working together to create something designed specifically to ruin your day. Well, you end up on the front lines of a new theatre of warfare, cyber warfare. But how do countries actually conduct this modern form of conflict? What impact can it have on a nation's infrastructure? And why should we be absolutely petrified of it? Alright, so a short history of cyber warfare. Now, first of all, it's important to understand the basics of cyber warfare. It's defined as the use of computer technology to disrupt the activities of a state or organization, especially through deliberate attacks on information systems for strategic or military purposes. End quote. Now, that definition could vary slightly depending on who you ask. For example, some consider real attacks on cyber infrastructure to be a central element of cyber warfare. But for now, this definition will suffice for us. In essence, it refers to using computers to create problems between countries in order to gain some kind of advantage. This encompasses a range of tactics from malware attacks such as computer viruses and phishing schemes designed to steal information, to denial of service attacks, zero-day exploits, man-in-the-middle attacks for data gathering, and unauthorized access through hacking. There are many methods at a nation's disposal if it decides to target another country. While cyber warfare has existed in very primitive forms for quite some time, the first computer virus was developed in the 1980s, the use of computers by one nation to harm another remained almost unheard of until the late 2000s. In 2007, Russia launched a massive cyber attack against Estonia, marking one of the earliest known instances of cyber warfare and causing widespread chaos. They employed similar tactics during the brief 2008 Russia-Georgia war, attacking Georgia as a complement to their traditional military actions. In 2010, the world saw what the US and Israel had to offer with Stuxnet, a computer virus that caused Iranian uranium-enriching centrifuges to spin out of control and ultimately break. To our knowledge, it remains the most intricate computer virus ever deployed. Yet, in the years since, nations have not rested on their laurels. Just before Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the acid rain cyber attack knocked the internet offline for thousands of people for several weeks, even affecting users as far away as Morocco. In the mid-2010s, China stole the data of millions of US employees. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia attacked Libya, the UK targeted ISIS, Iran struck Israel, and many other incidents further underscored the rise of cyber warfare. Now, cyber attacks rarely make headlines unless a particularly blatant incident occurs, such as when North Korea hacked Sony in 2014. This scarcity in public reporting is partly by design. Cyber weapons can easily incite public panic, so governments may choose to disguise previously unknown attacks as mere maintenance work or a glitch in the system in order to maintain order. But despite everything, we should really be paying more attention to the world of cyber warfare. It may be the most terrifying application of modern warfare that we, as a species, have yet to witness. If you don't believe me, let me explain. So, why is cyber warfare so frightening? Sure, it can't exactly shut down an entire army all at once, but that's not necessary for it to be seriously and dangerously effective. Cyber warfare has the power to undermine even the most well-defended nation, impacting the lives of those who are considered the best off and most secure in society. It represents a new front where borders barely exist, one that can reach directly into your home and affect you personally. In doing so, it creates a profound psychological impact that is uniquely and equally felt across all communities. You don't need conventional bombs, bullets, or missiles to achieve strategic effects. A small, relatively weak country on one side of the world can impact the biggest and most powerful nation on Earth. Just look at North Korea, which has successfully waged cyber warfare across the globe. Much like how the individual level finds a great equalizer, the international arena witnesses a similar phenomenon. Cyber warfare proves to be a frighteningly versatile means of conflict. It can target vulnerable civilian infrastructure, causing critical systems to shut down and unleashing widespread havoc. At the same time, some military targets are easier to attack in cyberspace than with physical missiles. For example, consider the Natanz nuclear enrichment plant in Iran. In 2010, Stuxnet severely impacted Iran's uranium enrichment capabilities, reducing them by a fifth. Remarkably, not a single person died. In contrast, kinetic attacks by Israel in the ensuing years have achieved far fewer results. Other ways to employ cyber attacks include more coordinated efforts as part of hybrid warfare. Russia was the first to showcase this capability in 2008 during its invasion of Georgia. Cyber warfare can also be as simple as stealing data and sending it back home rather than completely shutting systems down, a tactic that has a number of nefarious uses, particularly for countries at war. So you can probably now see what we mean when we say that it's very versatile. Taking a step further, cyber warfare doesn't have to be confined to cyberspace. Actions taken in the real world can have significant cyber implications. For instance, damage to undersea cables, electrical transformers, critical computer networks, or even satellites could all impact another nation's cyber capabilities. As you might imagine, a well-coordinated and carefully planned significant cyber assault could have far-reaching effects on a country. So, let's consider, what would total cyber warfare do to a nation? What is the worst-case scenario if a country is hit unexpectedly and completely unprepared? There are a million things that can cause a cyber attack to ruin your country, but instead of listing them all, let's run through an extreme yet realistic scenario, a total cyber warfare campaign that's executed successfully. This example quickly shows why it's such a horrifying concept. Alright, close your eyes and imagine for a minute. You're an average person living in an average country with moderate wealth, strong independent infrastructure, and somewhat adequate if slightly stretched cyber defenses that aren't on red alert. You wake up early one morning to discover that the power in your house is dead. It's dark both inside and out. None of the switches work, and even the breakers refuse to reset the system. You resign yourself to the idea of having to call an electrician, only to find out that you can't get through. You check your phone, there's no signal, no Wi-Fi. Rather odd. Your freezer is full of food that's now defrosting, and your fridge is warm. Clearly, this will be a long day. You step outside, only to find that not a single light on your street is on, not even the street lamps that should be glowing at this hour. You check your phone again, but scrolling through social media and calling your family to see if they're experiencing the same thing proves futile. Unbeknownst to everyone in your nation, you've just been hit with a massive, coordinated cyber and kinetic attack. During the night, your nation's arch nemesis stealthily approached your shoreline and cut the vital fuel lines and undersea cables connecting your country to the internet and international banking services. At the same time, a cyber attack hit your weather, military, and surveillance satellites, rendering your leadership completely blind. Later, these satellites were destroyed by low-orbit missiles, ensuring they will never come back online. Meanwhile, the smart infrastructure, designed to distribute power fairly based on areas of use, was also attacked. A worm infiltrating its digital framework caused every transformer to redirect power to itself one at a time. As a result, the entire national grid is down, and acquiring a new transformer typically requires a lead time of about 2 years, unless you have spares. So, good luck getting the power back on. Instantly, your country is plunged back into an age before electricity. A dire setback, since everything of course, depends on power. Communication has come to a standstill because the internet has been completely cut off, leaving only isolated military communication lines operational. Only a small number of civilians have generators, and even then, they are few and far between. The military and governments were naturally the first to notice and scrambled to restore the nation's infrastructure. However, they soon realized that the transformers were fried and other key components of the electrical grid had burned out along the way. The entire national defense now runs on reserve power. The guidance systems malfunction, GPS is spotty at best, and the radar is unreliable. None of the fighter jets can communicate with one another or their commanders, and anticipating an imminent attack, the military has retreated to more defensible internal positions. Along the borders, reserve power barely keeps some air defense systems operational, but this limited resource is already stretched too thin to be dependable. Meanwhile, half of the soldiers guarding the border have been ordered to regroup at a designated point amid growing reports of a civilian crisis. Relying on the age-old technique of word of mouth, every rapid response strategy appears unable to be carried out methodically. At the same time, patients on life support throughout the nation begin to flatline. Doctors panic and surgeries are performed under the feeble light of battery-operated torches. Back in the civilian world, the entire nation has more or less collapsed into chaos. People, left without food because their refrigerators no longer function, rush to stores as soon as they open to grab canned food and bottled water. When someone tries to pay for as much as they can with a bank card, it's declined because the entire network's down, and without any cash available, they can't pay for anything else. Not that this cash would be all that useful at this point. The massive coordinated attack that has effectively severed your country from the rest of the world brought your supply chains and logistics to a screeching halt. The economy collapses almost immediately as a result. People's money quickly becomes worthless, and looting begins, with local police forces unable to contain the chaos. Society as a whole begins to break down. The government finds itself unable to even contact its people. Attempts to reach out via radio broadcast and by sending messengers town to town to urge people to calm down prove futile. At this stage, the situation's escalated far beyond that. Meanwhile, small groups of local residents have armed themselves to police their neighborhoods, and others with lingering grievances do the same. As a result, armed militias now roam the streets, clashing with one another, with the police and potentially even the military in a struggle to gain control. Meanwhile, water becomes the next casualty. Water treatment and sewage plants have been offline for some time or operating on generators. Drinking water quickly becomes contaminated, and people start falling ill almost immediately, further exacerbating every other crisis. Amid the violence and disease, hospitals, which also depend on power, of course, are completely overwhelmed. There are not enough staff, beds, power sources, or equipment. Emergency services struggle to contain the chaos and provide help to as many people as possible, but it feels like a losing battle. With no reliable information reaching the citizens, psychological operations and conspiracy theories sweep across the country. People are left in the dark, unsure of what is happening or what to believe. As bits of information trickle in, whether accurate or not, the fear and anger continue to grow. So in short, your country is completely cut off and at the mercy of your arch-nemesis, who is now beginning to march over the border. The economy is devastated. People are dying. Uprisings are occurring, and there's almost no quick way to get the word out. Some back-channel lines may ensure that friendly neighbors offer to help if you're lucky, but by then, the damage is already done. Other nations are struggling to see into your country and communicate with you. They're hesitant to intervene out of fear of misunderstanding. If your own government doesn't know the full facts on the ground, neither will they. While this is a dramatic example, a scenario where everything that can go wrong does go wrong, it is not entirely beyond the realm of possibility that a coordinated attack from a prepared enemy could cause some, if not all, of these events to occur. It all begins by attacking several strategic weak points simultaneously: undersea cables, transformers, and satellites, all of which are often exposed. For a nation like the United States, the biggest concern is the transformers. Although the US does have some spares, these remain the weakest link in its power grid as a whole. Meanwhile, the Navy is more than capable of protecting the cables, and when it comes to satellites, the US Space Force now appears considerably more competent than it did when President Trump first established it. However, every nation has its own vulnerabilities and lacks even half the resources available to the US. In the realm of total cyber warfare, most countries around the globe are simply not prepared. Cyber warfare, it doesn't need to be all-out total destruction. Indeed, it can be used to push already struggling nations over the edge. Imagine a cyber attack that decimates automates water treatment plants in a country already lacking water security. Or picture a largely cashless society losing its banking system overnight, crashing the economy. What if one country tampers with another's dense public transportation network, trapping people, causing delays, or even inflicting physical harm? These kinds of cyber skirmishes, designed to test a nation's infrastructure, will become more common as digital technology becomes further integrated into every facet of society, leading to potentially disastrous consequences if countries remain unprepared. And most are not. So, what does the future hold for cyber warfare and for nations defending against it? Are we all simply doomed to bear the burden of endless cybersecurity breaches? To understand the future of cyber warfare, we also need to grasp where warfare itself is headed. Overall, warfare is trending in a less overt direction, meaning that the line between what is considered warfare and what is not is becoming increasingly blurred. Our Western understanding of war is rooted in older eras where technology was very different. Back in World War II or the Vietnam War, warfare was defined primarily by kinetic attacks on soldiers and civilians, with some psychological tactics thrown into the mix. Today, however, if you look at modern Russian military doctrine, for example, almost any form of asymmetric conflict is regarded as a type of warfare, one aimed at achieving the same results that bombs or bullets once did. Consider Russian disinformation campaigns, for example. Is this war? Well, the Russians believe it is, but in the West, it appears distinctly separate. Or take the economic warfare that has almost constantly unfolded between the USA and China. Is that war? Well, many might say yes, others might disagree. And then there's the sabotaging of pipelines or the cutting of undersea cables, actions that are even closer to what we in the West might consider war, yet some may argue still don't qualify. Cyber attacks fall somewhere on this spectrum. It seems logical that the blurriness of the concept of warfare itself opens the door for cyber warfare to emerge as a new tool to gain an edge. And why wouldn't it grow? With every passing decade, technology becomes more integrated, more digital, and in many ways more advanced than before. We're now beginning to witness the expansion of mass technological surveillance and even developments such as smart cities, where critical infrastructure is rendered digital. The reasoning here is simple. The more systems there are to attack, the more opportunities there will be for attacks. Cyber attacks will continue to become increasingly sophisticated, attempting to infiltrate deeper into our systems over time and causing potentially devastating consequences. In the ongoing cycle of measures and countermeasures, however, it stands to reason that cyber defenses will also improve. Moreover, while cyber attacks are dangerous, they typically do not target individuals or create the kinetic destruction that bombs and missiles do. In fact, they can serve as a means for nations to confront one another without a direct loss of life, a factor that might paradoxically lead to greater stability. And although we mentioned that countries around the world are not prepared, the reality is that many are taking steps in that direction. Several nations have started developing comprehensive cyber defense strategies. Since the early 2020s, NATO has been working on its own approach, and its allies recently agreed to establish the NATO Integrated Cyber Defense Center to better coordinate cybersecurity efforts in 2024. This progress is encouraging. It's reassuring to know that many of us will have some protection, even if a massive cyber war were to erupt tomorrow. Or will we? Two primary factors make the concept of future cyber warfare so concerning. First, as technology becomes more complicated, it also tends to become more vulnerable. This increased vulnerability applies to even integrated defense networks. Human error can easily slip through a dodgy line of code here, something improperly connected there, or even someone taking a bribe to install unauthorized software. Any one of these mistakes could create a backdoor, unleashing chaos if a computer worm were to gain access. Thus, more complex technology does not automatically mean increased safety, even in the era of advanced encryption and robust NATO strategies. Measure, countermeasure. The more things change, the more they stay the same. The other thing, arguably the scarier one, is that the concept of cyber warfare has only been around in any meaningful way for perhaps 30 years. Stuxnet was discovered in 2010, but it had been developed in the early 2000s and was based on a series of computer viruses from the early 90s. 30 years is a long time in modern military developments. Just consider the first tank, the British Mark I in 1915, compared to the US rollout of the M26 Pershing in 1945. The speed at which a concept proves its utility in warfare is staggering, and all the cyber warfare capabilities discussed demonstrate that it has significant potential. This raises the question: if militarized computer viruses and cyber warfare have been around for a similar length of time, and if Stuxnet, upon its discovery, was the most advanced cyber weapon the general public knew about, then what on earth might they look like today? With AI technology advancing faster than ever, when do we transition from science fiction to science fact. They say the devil that you know is better than the devil you don't. For now, though, cyber warfare remains the devil we certainly haven't met. Thank you for watching.